The Bill of Rights is a stumbling block on the way to shutting down speech that the left doesn't like, at least in government. But there's a new avenue for those who would like to censor what you say and think, and that's corporations. The left have wised up to this. If you want to stop someone from telling the truth, use companies to do it, the social media giants, and they are. So far, the most prominent casualty of the crusade against free expression has been the radio show host Alex Jones. But are we smart to think censorship will stop with him? Mark Penn is a former advisor to Bill Clinton. He is a liberal who still believes in the free exchange of ideas, and he joins us tonight. So thank you, Mark, for coming on. So I'm fascinated by the Alex Jones story because it was Alex Jones. Almost no conservatives rose to his defense because the idea was, well, Alex Jones, ew, yuck. But it's not really about Alex Jones, is it? It's about the idea that companies can make it impossible for your voice to be heard. Is that a precedent we should be comfortable with?
Well, I really think you have to be worried about big tech becoming Big Brother.
Yes.
Because these used to be neutral platforms that said, we're open to free expression, that's our core value. And now they've said, well, not so much, with particularly Facebook hiring 10,000 new censors on top of another 10,000 and having roving censoring bots looking for content. Look, I never read Alex Jones, but here's somebody with millions of followers, publicly accountable for his speech, operating within Supreme Court standards, yanked from the media. That's a surprise to me. That says that these platforms are no longer as open as they presented themselves to be.
And it's not just him. There are many like him who've been yanked, lesser known, but still. So this has political implications. You ran and managed campaigns for so long. This must have occurred. A lot of our political debate takes place on social media platforms. So if they clamp down on one side of the debate, why wouldn't that influence an elections outcome?
Well, obviously it could have a big influence on elections, increasingly because where people turn for their news is that they look at the news feeds that are run by the major social media companies. And so they're more powerful than any TV station, more powerful than Fox.
Yes, they are.
Because of the amount of time that people spend, and it's a funnel. So if you're not at the top, you don't get seen. And so in the past, they had some neutral ways of doing this, but now they've increasingly applied still more mysterious algorithms plus individual censors. And remember, they're private platforms, they say, so they're not actually subject to the First Amendment unless we get some legislation here that says free speech is an internet right.
Well, it's totally meaningless. If I own a toll road, I can't say anyone of a certain race can't drive on my toll road. And so they're not actually fully private companies. We have a public interest, I would say, in keeping them free and open. Why aren't, if you cared about the integrity of our elections, why isn't Congress acting?
I don't know why Congress isn't acting. Part of it is because to stand up to a social media company means you could have 5 million people on your doorstep the next day. So I think there's been a lot of intimidation in Congress instead of bipartisan agreement that, hey, we cannot have this kind of regulation of speech where whoever runs one of the big platforms can pick out speech, which speech goes and which speech doesn't. Not when they've been exempted from the libel laws, when they've been set up as open platforms, and they now become media companies instead. And that's exactly what's happened. They become media companies that take ads on the media that they run, and they have editors and algorithms and bots that run it.
Nearly 1 out of every 5 human beings on the planet lives in China. That's almost 1.4 billion people total. To give you some sense of scale, the United States has less than 0.4 billion total. There's a lot of people. Now the Communist Chinese government wants to give every single one of these people a ranking. Chinese officials plan to use technology to collect and analyze people for their new social credit system, which will then allow the government to administer punishment and, of course, hand out rewards, the carrot and the stick, based on good and bad behavior. Political obedience, of course, will be central to this. It's basically naughty and nice, but there's no Santa in this calculation. What does this mean, and could it come here? Gordon Chang is author of The Coming Collapse of China.
What we have in China is that there's so many people there, of course. The government wants to control them, and so what they're doing is they're collecting data. They're collecting data from 600 million cameras that they'll have in place in 2020. They're going to have, traffic checks, all the rest of it. This is being rolled out, and it's being rolled out very quickly. So, for instance, you've got people who are not allowed to board planes and trains because their social credit score is far too low.
Why do we never hear anything about it from the self-appointed moral watchdogs atop our society?
That's a great question, and I actually don't know the answer for it, because this is the biggest human rights abuse in the world today. And we have China putting people basically into internment camps in northwestern China. 1 million people. This is a crime against humanity. We don't hear about that either. And the thing that I think we will hear about it is when they roll out this system for foreigners. So we know that the Chinese government is tracking Chinese in the United States. They are actually contacting people in the U.S. This is just going to get worse and worse until the U.S. government pushes back.
What about the tech companies, our tech companies that exert so much social control over our society? Have they issued an unequivocal statement against this, or do we suspect they sympathize with this idea?
I think they probably sympathize with it because they sold much of the technology to the Chinese that they've used, incorporated into their system. Now, of course, the Chinese have been able to improve what they've gotten, but nonetheless, they would not be anywhere near their level of perfection if it weren't for U.S. and other Western companies.
I mean, do we send them torture equipment, too, for political prisoners? I mean, at some point, can a company do something that's so morally repulsive that there's an outcry about it? I mean, the idea that American tech companies are abetting this garbage is unbelievable.
It is unbelievable. And also, we've got American companies in Xinjiang, which is that region in northwestern China where you have, the attempt to eradicate the Muslim religion. Well, we have U.S. companies with big operations in Xinjiang, and, they shouldn't be in China anyway, but nonetheless, to be at the site of a human rights violation, which is the worst in the world, it's just indescribable, as you put it.